So we'll see how we can use APIs with Cisco Meeting Server. So it's a very vast topic where in APIs you can have a lot of things. We have objects, everything we can configure through APIs, not from the development standpoint, but from the configuration we will understand here, because creating APIs and objects, working in that depends, and that is the responsibility of the developers. So they created and we use the APIs to do the configurations. So here we will see that. So here we'll see how the APIs work, how you can use them, and how you can configure CMS using the APIs. Let's begin. So here we can see an introduction of API, how it works. So APIs are the applications. API stands for Application Programming Interface. So it's, as the name says, it is giving an interface to program any application where, in our case, it is CMS. So APIs are not only used in case of CMS, but for various purposes. It can support various servers and the configuration for various services. Specifically here, we will be talking about configuring CMS through API. So APIs are used by the applications to provide an interface that will allow them to do things like configurations and monitoring other systems, all that we can do using the API. So they enable the applications to communicate, and the development of the solution that integrates the application. Here we can see the API integrating with the application with the server, and the server is asking, please give me a list of users on the system, and the API is giving a list of the users. So it uses a XML format as the part of coding how the API is built. Then here we can see some different types of API protocols which are used. So the two main protocols are SOAP and REST. SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol, and REST API, which is the one we use for CMS, it stands for Representational State Transfer. Okay, so there are several other standards and protocols for API. These are the most commonly used in collaboration devices, specifically REST and SOAP. So the two main differences between REST and SOAP are that SOAP is a protocol while REST is a collection of standards. And there are a set of protocols or standards within REST, and SOAP itself is a protocol, which is a stateful protocol, and REST is a stateless standard. Now, what is the difference between stateful and stateless here? So stateless connections are like one-time hits. So every command sent to the API has to be separately authentic. So here in this case, we can see in case of stateless, which is REST, every command which is being executed is asking for credentials. So it says send a request with credentials. So every time it is authenticated, that is stateless. Whereas in SOAP APIs, these are better suited for tasks like monitoring, where you want any real-time communication, or frequent communications are used for example, for reporting. So REST APIs are better in case where things like which needs more authentication or which are not frequent, like configuration type tasks. So we use REST APIs for configuring the CMS, not the SOAP. These are used for like monitoring purposes and for real-time tasks where uh, it can be used for just one-time authentication. And once the authentication is built, unless it is being disconnected with the app, it will be authenticated. So it just sends setup connection, exchange that information, and that's it. It will stay up unless it is disconnected manually. So that is how these two protocols work. So we are here focusing on the REST API because that is what we are going to do for the configurations. Then this picture represents a hierarchy of the different objects used in API. So first, we talked about REST. REST is the service which we are talking about. So based on REST only, we are seeing this hierarchy which we are using. So REST is a web service API, meaning it is hosted in a web server and accessed using protocols like HTTPS, Transport Protocol. To send a request to the web API, you need to have a URL which identifies what data is in the database you are trying to access. Now, this example shows that there are some objects defined and instances. So data in REST API is defined by objects and instances. Objects are fixed in data structure and we cannot change them or define the hierarchy of the data, whereas instances of the data a user can create, can do select operations and update or delete, things like that. So those are called instances where you can modify the data, but objects are fixed. So looking at this diagram, you can see the hierarchy from REST API where it is split into two types. So two objects basically. So one is animals, other is plants, just to see example to understand how it works. So the animals are then further separated into two types, mammals and reptiles. Same way we have plants and which is only in one category, and that is flowers. Yeah. So we can have objects and then there are sub objects that we can have, and multiple object hierarchy there can be, and then there can be instances which we can choose, and we can even modify the instances. These are the things we use. So here, for example, we see we have suppose elephants and snakes. We select elephant. Then in elephant, you have instances like African or Indian. Yeah, in that there will be some attributes. Like what are the different attributes of African, and based on those attributes only they are segregated and distinguished. So we can use as per the attributes we want what instance to be used, and those instance attributes we can select and modify and so on. If we want to add any object, that is done by the development team. So let's suppose in the mammal you want to add one more. Let's suppose monkeys, things like that. So that is done by the development team. But here, let's suppose if you want to discover any new species or any objects, technically, to add to your system, they can be added by using these objects, these APIs. You just need to know how to use them. And that is it. Now, let's suppose we have chosen the object elephant, and then there are two different instances of it. And within the instances, the attributes I was talking about are these. So like each are set having different attributes. So based on that, we can select what instance to be used. Yeah, so these attributes are there. Same is the case for CMS configuration. When we do, we will find attributes. We can change them. We can modify them within the instances. Yeah, so the attributes of the instance are defined in the database, but the value of those attributes is configurable in the API. As objects, we cannot change. So here, for example, we can see these attributes here. Next, we have these operations. So REST API use four type of operations mainly, that is get, put, post, and delete. So get is to get information from the server. Basically, this is used to retrieve a list of the instances in that level of hierarchy. Yeah. So if we go back here, the first thing is objects. Objects are just predefined. We just go to the object. It's just the part of the hierarchy. And then what we select is the instance in there. Yeah. So it begins from there and we retrieve a list of the instances that is called get operation. Yeah. Then post operation is creating a new instance. So post creates an instance at that level of hierarchy if you want to create any instance. Put is to put any updates, any changes, for example, updating the attributes of an existing instance, that is a put operation. Then delete is deleting any instance. All these things we can do within the API. Now, this is the output XML format in which it is coded. So when you create an instance in the database, if you are working in the development, then you should know XML formatting, and this is how it works. So when you create an instance, the instance will be allocated by default. A 128-bit unique ID is given to all the instances just to distinguish them with their unique IDs called GUID. GUID stands for Global Unique Identifier, and this is how the instances will be identified, and the operations will run based on the IDs selected. So you can do get, which is retrieving the instance, put, update the instance, or delete the instance. All these operations we can perform on these instances. Um, Here, it just is a recommendation from Cisco, as it is a detailed reference guide. Cisco has, when they have recently introduced this API option in CMS, they suggest using the reference guide that you can find on Cisco's website. You can just download that copy and use that when you're using APIs to avoid any errors, and for reference, it is really helpful. Okay. Some questions. What would you use to find out what species of elephant exist? Now, here we just have to focus on what information we are trying here. So we want to find out what instance is there. So for that, to finding out, to retrieve information, the answer would be get. Yeah. Next, what would you use to change the color of the reference of a variety of tulip whenever you make any changes, update anything? That is a put operation. Okay. What would you use to add a new species in the instance of roses? So if whenever you add any instance, yeah, the complete instance, any new instance we are adding, that is a post operation. And lastly, delete if you want to delete any instance. Now, this is the URL of the Cisco Meeting Server API. Either you can use this, or simply we can just log into CMS, and if it is supporting that after the 2.9 version, you will simply find it under configuration. You can just scroll down, you'll find API option that we will see now. Now, this is more technical hierarchy here, like we saw previously, an example of the objects and instances. This is what we are going to use here. Like in our case in CMS, we have these objects, and these are the instances, the call legs. In call legs, you will find some attributes. So that we will see. Just let me start. Hello. Hello.
Yes,
Am I
Jyoti.
audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Fine. So I'm logged into the lab. Let me share my screen again. So here we will explore options like how to connect to the meeting server REST API using the web admin API tool we have now. We will perform these get, post, put, delete operations. And for that, we will need to log into our CMS. Make sure that when you're using CMS and you have WebBridge, also enable WebBridge service, so the default port will not be used to access CMS then. Like in the previous example, we changed the port to 445. So for web admin, we have to use that. So this is the CMS IP in my instructor lab, which I'm using to demonstrate this, because the new CMS version is not in the labs we have here. Yeah. So, um, Okay, I'm logged into my CMS. Now here under configuration, we can find API. Right? So this is what we have as a new inbuilt API feature in CMS, the latest versions, the 3.0. So here we will see a list of all the objects. So this is a table which represents all the objects here. We can select from the list of objects what configuration we need to do. And based on that, so that's why it's a recommendation to go through the reference guide from Cisco whenever you're doing any configurations. It's not that difficult, just uh, a hierarchy has to be followed. So here we'll see, we will configure call leg. We'll configure it for the calls. So let's first configure that. So in filter, we can use the object call leg, it is without space profile. We need to configure call leg profile. So this is the one we have to choose. The first one with the arrow. This is the configurable. Click this. Now, when you click this, it will open up with some information here in the list object ID. You can see if there are any call legs already configured, but as right now we do not have any, we will create one. If you scroll down to this list profiles configuration, just a moment. Okay, so this is the list again of all the different collect profiles and IDs and the different objects within the collect profile that we can see. To find the list of the collects, we will find it under object ID. But here we do not have any, so we can't see. To create one, we will have to click create new from here. Okay, now these are the attributes we see. So let's change some attributes. Uh, Here, all these attributes are for call leg profile specifically as we are into the call leg profile. So based on the call leg, what attributes we can define, all that we can see here. Take a look, like text activation, default layout, or those add participants. So we'll change something here. Let's test with one of the attribute, like for example, presentation contribution. Lab lags a little. So I'll make it false. This just simply means that the presentation or screen sharing will not be allowed to any of the participants in this call link. And I will just save it and then we'll later on change it also and see the change. Okay, click create. Now this will disable the content sharing for all in that space that we are creating. And the call like profile should be created. And here we can see it under object configuration. Even if we go to project profiles from here, you can see the object ID, which is configured for the call leg that we have created. So earlier it was empty, there was nothing. Now we can see the one we have added. Now we need to assign that call leg profile to a default profile. So that it becomes the default for all spaces. So next thing is creating a system profile, which we can search. Return to object list. Now we need to search for system dash profiles. Yeah, this is the one. You can click this arrow. This is the default profile. So because this is a system default, we cannot add or delete this or make any changes here. We can only view or edit. So here what we are going to do is we'll use its default layout profile. Click view or edit. So system profile will always be there. It's default. You can't delete or create any new from here from API, but you can view and edit from the existing ones. So that's what we are doing. So we will assign our collect profile as default so that all the users can use this default profile by clicking here, and then we will scroll down here to what attributes we want here. So we can see a list of all the profiles that can be assigned. If you select choose collect profile, we have only one. If we have more than one collect profiles created, you will see a list of those, and you can assign whatever collect profile you want to. You can select this, click modify. It should be created. Objects. Okay, so by retrieving this collect profile, system profile, we have done the get operation. Whenever we make any changes that when modify it, that is a put operation. So that is what we are going to do now. So the collect profile we have applied to the system profile for all users. That is a put operation to update the system profile. We will now see. We can see this here as an object, and we can click this, and we are under the collect profile we have, which is assigned with a unique ID. Our attribute we have changed is presentation contribution allowed changed to false, so no screen sharing would be allowed. So yeah, that's it. This is what we wanted to see. We have made the simple configuration here. Now we want to verify this. So we will now open another tab in the browser using the default port. We will log into the same IP 10.1.31 dot 5.31. 5.31. So this is for the users to access the web app, the default port. Okay, we are in the web app now. We'll sign in. So we have for testing, we have a user name. We have two users. We can log in with any user here. Let's log in with this user. SHO, it's Sasha Ho is the name. At the rate meet. This is a domain dot cll hyphen lab dot internal. If you remember, this is just simply the same thing like we configured yesterday for the web bridge. The URI we configured with join.cms hyphen domain name. Same thing is this. In this lab, it is meet.cll hyphen collab. So this is what the URI the users are going to use. And password. Okay, we are logged in. You can see we are in a Sasha host space. Yeah, this is a space created using the APIs. Okay, so this is done. We are now dialed in, but we want to now check what happens when we join the meeting as we have changed an attribute here of the screen sharing. So let's just click join, allow this option for the camera and the microphone to work. And then here, this is just the display. We are still not joined. This is what we see before joining, right? So this is the display, and just to demonstrate the video option, there is a default. If you scroll down, you can only see microphone and only disconnect leave call option, but there's no screen sharing option available. Like that is because we have disabled that. To enable this on, we'll keep this active, this meeting here, and we'll go back to CMS and make that change. So we are on this page only where we have presentation contribution allowed set as false. We will set this to true. Click modify. Just wait a little. And a very good thing about these APIs is that you do not have to, like in the case of this ongoing meeting, you do not have to go back, sign out, sign in again, or it does not take the time to update. Even if in the ongoing call for any call, like you want to change attributes as an administrator, you can do that and it automatically gets updated. So if I scroll down here, just update it. Not out. To do that again. I go to like files. This is my collect profile. From here, I will just change this. This was not updated earlier because I was logged out. To true. Scroll down, modify. As you modify it, let's go back to the meeting. And we can see the content sharing is now available. Right? So this is another operation we have performed at the same time by changing it. So the API has done the post to create a call leg profile, put to update the system profile with call leg, and we did another put operation when we changed the presentation setting. Now let's see, we can delete this to delete our call leg. Again, this is something you should know. Let me just disconnect. Um, And so if you're working with these APIs for the first time, even delete operation would be something confusing sometimes because by default, delete is not allowed. It's just a simple setting. It's set to disable delete option. So even the ones we have created, like the call leg just now, we cannot delete it by default. We can just simply change that setting to allow delete. So let's see. Object list. Let it load. And in the object list here, yeah, if you scroll to the right, you can see by default it is set to disallow delete. To allow delete, you have to click allow delete. And now you will be allowed to make delete operation. Otherwise, it is not allowed by default. Then there is required delete confirmation. Like simply it will ask you, are you sure you want to delete this object and so on. So it is a recommended option to keep it checked. Otherwise, if as you just click delete option, it will not immediately delete. So sometimes by mistake, if you click delete, it will be deleted. So now we will go to our collect profiles. Here, let's on the objects. Yeah. Yeah. Now we can see this option to delete, which is by default not there, but as we have enabled delete option and we have the required confirmation checked. So it's asking, are you sure you want to delete this object? I say, okay, yes, and it will be deleted. And that is it. So in this lab, we have seen that the operations we can perform using APIs. We have the inbuilt APIs. We have all the objects. We can perform these operations like get, post, put, and delete operations to make them work. So that is it about the web API. So for different kind of objects and configurations, we can use these inbuilt objects and do the configurations accordingly, in which you will find different attributes and instances that you can use from the predefined template. And that is it. So I'd refer